Vladimir Putin has just addressed the Russian people moments ago, announcing what Putin called the start of a military special operation, in his words, to demilitarize Ukraine.
This was now 1 year ago, and the war between Russia and Ukraine has only gotten messier since. The plan for U.S. involvement remains unclear. How far will we go? Because Biden has already crossed the lines that just months ago he said he never would.
The idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, that's called World War III.
So how many more lines are we going to cross? And when will one of those lines be enough for Russia to turn its eyes directly onto America instead? The threat of war looms greater every day, and now, soon, it may not just be Russia that the U.S. has to face.
A new report suggesting Chinese President Xi Jinping is planning to visit Russia to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Tonight, I'm joined by people who know a lot more than me. Experts who will argue that we should and shouldn't be involved. I have my opinion, sure you have yours. Can they sway you from one side to the other? Tonight, debate. Is it time to stop arming Ukraine?
Hello, America. I feel almost like I'm out of my body watching somebody else doing this. Oh, maybe I'm dying. Because I really believe this war is coming. And we haven't had a debate, and it's not real to people. 78% of Americans now think that nuclear war is possible. We went from 0 to a worry of 76 or 78%. That's a little disturbing. We can't live in the past and say, oh my gosh, oh gee, it wouldn't have happened if Trump were in, it wouldn't have. But you know what? That's the past. And we can't just look at the future and be so trapped by the future. We're living in the now, and we have got to make the decision, or it will be made for us. Last Friday marked the 1-year anniversary since Russia invaded Ukraine. It was the largest military action in Europe since World War II. The Russians advanced on 3 fronts, holding ground all the way up to Kyiv. Now, this is what it looks like after 12 months. Russia has been pushed back completely out of the north, and a bloody stalemate rages every single day in the east. Now, the question is, how did Ukraine pull this off? The answer is scary, but it's easy. It's not like there's any kind of Cold War era secrecy going on here. There's no clandestine men in, black hats, looking to thwart the Russians' advance. No, we're doing it. We're helping Ukraine, and we're openly bragging about it, all out in the open. Just last week, Joe Biden was right there in Kyiv with Zelensky. Yes. Now, see this scene? Can you imagine if Brezhnev did this in Hanoi during the Vietnam War? How do you think we would have reacted? The CIA, we all knew the Soviet Union was supplying weapons and advisors to aid the North Vietnamese, but it was never bragged about. It was never talked about in the open. It was a little game we were playing to keep the war cold. The Soviets never held media press conferences announcing how much money and weapons they'll be donating to help kill Americans. But we're doing that now every other week. And meanwhile, the body bags are really starting to pile up. I want to show you how much help we've given. This chart shows the estimate of the amount of military and financial aid the world has ponied up to fuel this war. Look at us, way up at the top. Then the entire EU, we're 73, they're 35. What about Italy? 1, Japan, 1, Norway, 1, France, 1.6, Poland, 4. The United States has shouldered most of this burden over and over and over again. Over 70 billion taxpayer dollars, and there is no clear end in sight. We have literally given Ukraine a blank check and go kill Russians, but with no goal stated or endpoint stated. I guess that's not entirely accurate, really. Last week, Biden did tweet that this will go on for, quote, as long as it takes. What does that mean? What is our goal? Does that mean 70 billion could one day turn into 70 trillion if it just doesn't end? Would it ever be too much? It doesn't appear to be. NATO tweeted this video just a few days after Biden pledged his unlimited blank check support.
We will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. We will not back down.
Okay, we will not back down. So if we take them at their word, this means that this war can go on and on and on. That's the way all wars seem to go now, with infinite amounts of funds and weapons. And we are more than ready to escalate, escalate, escalate. As a whole, the West has given around $56 billion in direct military assistance to Ukraine. So you know, that's more than we spent in Afghanistan. That would put that in the top 10 in global military spending, directly on par with NATO's France and Germany, and just under Russia. That's an awful lot of hardware. But by the way, is there any oversight on all these weapons at all? Are there personnel monitoring where all this money and equipment is going? No, of course not. We're dealing with the Biden administration. Not inside Ukraine. We don't have anyone on the ground observing where this stuff is going. Oversight is being done remotely. Wow. Well, it's a good thing that Ukraine is a country that doesn't have a reputation for being corrupt, because otherwise it might seem like we're being a little irresponsible, or we know that money might be coming back our direction, not to us, but whoever is laundering this money. Our military help goes even further than just supplying weapons. We're also now providing intelligence to help Ukraine kill high value targets. So basically, here are the weapons. Here's some cash. Get some of that back to us. And here's the people that you should kill. And again, all of this is spoken of and bragged about out loud. The mainstream media seems more willing to see all of this escalate. They're painting Biden as if he's a cross between Rambo and Winston Churchill, which would make a very ugly baby, but still, they're all about it. Do you remember when wars used to have opposition? Hippies would start rappelling from the rafters in protest. The left, always the left, uses ending a war as a political rallying cry. No more war. This time, these guys are goading this one to go in deeper and further. Where's the opposition? Well, the real answer is there isn't one. If you even do what I'm doing tonight and question our role, what the eventual goal is, or how much money we're spending, you're called a Putin lover. I'm not a Putin pal. I don't like Putin. He's a bloodthirsty killer. But if you mention that this conflict could spark a global war, well, you're then a fascist. How do all of these for long as it takes people completely disregard how high the stakes are? They brag about it on TV, but they don't think it's a big deal. This is different than everything else we have ever fought is a proxy war. They give Ukraine so many weapons that they are now on par with the military spending of major NATO members. And it's no big deal. Is the body count not high enough for them? Do people even know the body count? So far, Ukraine has suffered around 100,000 deaths. It is estimated Russia has suffered between 120 and 180,000 casualties. Now, let's put this into perspective. In the Korean War, 40,000 Americans died. 58 to 20 is what the number was in Vietnam. 15,000 Soviets died in Afghanistan. 13,500 died in the Kosovo War. If the Russian casualty numbers are accurate, they have probably taken more losses in Ukraine than any of these other wars combined. This is not a small thing. When will the Russians say out in the open who they're really at war with? Well, maybe they already have. NATO doesn't seem to have a problem with that. Last week, Prime Minister of Poland, a member of NATO, said, quote, "I expect there'll be very strong confirmation of our resilience and joint efforts to defeat Russia in Ukraine." This is a proxy war, but they see it as us versus them. And meanwhile, escalation continues. China is now considering arming Russia. Did you hear about that? Did you know that Biden has quadrupled U.S. troop presence in Taiwan? Biden's in talks with Poland to increase our military on the ground in Poland. Russian state TV is declaring that the United States has declared war on Russia. All of these escalations, by the way, have happened in the last 7 days. You hear anybody really talking about this? When will the people be let in and help decide? When will all of this be enough? Biden has said that Americans will not directly fight in this war, but how many times have you heard Democratic presidents make that promise in the past? Woodrow Wilson said it. America joined in World War I. He said, "I'll keep you out of war. Vote for me." FDR campaigned on it too, and then we entered World War II. LBJ said he wouldn't send American boys to do what, quote, Asian boys ought to be doing for themselves, and then proceeded to invade Vietnam. Biden has framed this war as a defense of democracy. Is that our job? Is our job to fund every war for that goal? If so, there's going to be a lot of wars. And who makes the call that one war over another is for furthering democracy? What's the standard for which the decision is being made? What's the standard for Ukraine? Is it the country that it's historically corrupt, probably still incredibly corrupt, and the neighbor of somebody that pisses us off? Yeah, that's defending democracy. We fund that war? Last week, when Biden was walking down the streets of Kyiv, he wasn't alone. House Republicans were there furthering this war as well. Despite all the warnings that this is escalating, it shares bipartisan support. Why? Why is it so imperative that we fight Russia in Ukraine? Why is it worth the risk of collapsing our economy, having massive food shortages all around the world, possibly getting into a nuclear war? We're crossing multiple red lines and threatening all-out global war. Later in the show, I'm going to be talking to experts on both sides of the debate. I felt it was really important that we had really solid case to go in and to stay out. So, General Jerry Boykin is going to be here in a minute. He's a guy that I really, really respect. He might change my mind. If you haven't noticed, I'm not really for going in. And in fact, I'd like all of this to stop. But let me show you first. I put a chalkboard together, and maybe these will change by the end of the show. But the chalkboard is of pros and cons of staying in this war. So let me start with the pros. Defense of democracy. This is from the perspective of we've got to go in and arm Ukraine. The pros. Defense of democracy. Okay, we hear this all the time. Now, it's directly from Biden himself. But we can't even define what our republic is. We know what a democracy is. And everybody in the mainstream media is saying this. The idea is democracy is the most humane form of government and system, and any other system that's different will lead to oppression on their people. Okay, I understand the argument. I just don't think it's our job. And I hate to ask you, but could you explain our super free ally, Saudi Arabia? Oh, here's one. How about all the media and the left that keep making excuses for Iran or China? Then you have, I love this, rules-based order. You remember this is new now, but George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, used to call it the New World Order. Sounded too scary, so they changed it. The idea is that the international community collectively holds rules that everyone is expected to follow. Well, it gets tricky, though, when a country's own national interests don't jive with the rest of the world. For example, what if 90% of one country's GDP comes from fossil fuels, but the world-based order calls for massive cuts, to dirty energy? Here's another one. What if country A doesn't want country B to join a hostile alliance, let's just say NATO, but the hostile alliance continues to expand towards country A? Would it then be in their best interest to intervene and stop country B? I mean, it might be in their interest, but not in line with the rules-based order, so I'm confused. This phrase is also frequently used just before there's some sort of regime change, or at least an attempt. God help us all. Then people are saying Russia won't stop with Ukraine. I don't think it's our Poland. I really don't. But maybe it is. I could be wrong. There are reports that Moldova is now fearing they could be next on Russia's invasion list. We have troops about 5 miles off of that border. We also have about 800,000 NATO citizens in Moldova, even though it's not a NATO country. What happens if any of those are killed or the Americans are killed? Do you think it'll get better? Putin has stated the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest political catastrophe in history. What if he just wants to reclaim all of the territory they once had? Would Poland be next? Romania? Hungary? Why would Putin just stop at Ukraine if he's willing to go this far? The argument would be that nothing can be assumed here and that Russia must be stopped now. If Russia is stopped, then we save ourselves from entering World War III. Here's another one. Maybe Russia won't go nuclear? Mutually assured destruction didn't just stop becoming a thing. The threat is there. This war will be fought conventionally for as long as it takes. But I tell you, because I believe we would do this, if our back is up against the wall and it means collapse of the United States government or a nuke to Russia, I'll bet you our generals would go nuke it, and I think our president would as well. And I'm sure that Putin would do it. As long as the Russian regime and homeland are not directly at risk, the nuclear threat is merely just that, a threat, I hope. And then if you just keep going down this road and we stay out of it, maybe World War III is not a threat. Russia can barely handle Ukraine. They can't afford to fight on multiple fronts. But that goes to one of our cons. We can't do that either because, I don't know if you know this, but we're broke. We cannot afford to continue to bankroll a global game. Not a war yet. Inflation is already at all-time highs. We continue to spend money we do not have. They're printing it, which makes inflation go up. And what happens if a conflict elsewhere that directly threatens the United States? Will our own military be depleted? Can we fight on 2 fronts, or God forbid 3? Defending democracy is not our job. That's been the problem over the last 70 years. Defending the United States, however, is our job, and we're doing a piss-poor job of it here. Isn't this kind of rhetoric exactly what has kept us in a state of perpetual war for the past 20 years? Will we, for the love of everything good and sacred, ever learn? Then we keep going down. We got World War III, possibly, the risk of nukes. It's real. Is this risk ever a risk that should be taken? Russia has already declared that Crimea is their homeland. If we support Ukraine and they try to take Crimea back, Ukraine, that would be a direct attack on Russia. That would fall in line with the Russian nuclear doctrine, green-lighting the use of nuclear weapons. Whether you agree with Russia's claims to that land is irrelevant. Do they believe it? World War III. What happens if Russia decides that the losses they are taking from Western weapons are just too great? And we've just pissed them off. And they know it's either them or us. So they decide to hit, where the weapons are coming from. Places like Poland would probably be first on the list. And that would trigger Article 5 and World War III would commence. Countries like China, who is already considering weapons to Russia, would be forced to choose sides. Is Ukraine worth this risk to you, America? I mean, I feel bad for the people, but are you willing to tube everything for Ukraine, a country that most people can't find on a map? Global supply chain and food and oil. The pandemic already turned the supply chain upside down. This war made things even worse. What happens if the war expands beyond Ukraine? How high are we willing to let gas and food prices get? How long will it take for civil unrest to break out in our streets? I'd like to also point out China. China is involving itself now. Oh, and we have Biden and General Milley. From the makers of Afghanistan comes World War III. I'm out. So when we come back, I want to talk to General Jerry Boykin. He can maybe answer these and make me feel better about it. Is Ukraine worth the risks? And what happens if Russia is not defeated? What happens if Russia is defeated? Next. Your life is about to get a whole lot healthier and happier as a pet owner. I mean, that's what you want, right? Good boy, good girl, best friend. They're part of the family. The hardest thing is losing a dog. I mean, they really do become part of the family. Unfortunately, you've been feeding your dog dry kibble food. It's not giving them what they need. This is where naturopathic Dr. Dennis Black comes in. A few years ago, he created Rough Greens. And from personal experience with my own dog, I can tell you my dog loves it and eats really for the first time. And he is like a miracle. I swear to you, he became a puppy again. It's a supplement that you can sprinkle on top of their food, and it gives them essential vitamins, nutrients, probiotics, antioxidants, everything your dog needs, but gets cooked out of things like dry kibble food. My dog Uno loves Rough Greens. Will you try it with your dog? It could make all the difference. roughgreens.com/Beck. Go there now. roughgreens.com/Beck. I want you to use this show the way I'm using it tonight. I don't know what to do at this point, but I think we're in very dangerous territory right now. And I wanted to talk to somebody that I thought might be able to change my mind. I don't want any of this stuff going on. We've done enough. But I wanted to talk to somebody that I really respect and has real experience here that, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. General Jerry Boykin, he is Lieutenant General. He is the Executive Vice President of the Family Research Council. And Jerry, we've known each other for a very long time. You're a very reasonable man, and you have been around. I mean, you were there at the beginning of Delta Force, and you've been in all of the big battles while you were there. This doesn't strike me as a proxy war anymore, which is different. We're starting to view the Russians, and Russians are viewing us as the force against them. How does that not end poorly?
Yeah, well, my biggest concern is just that, Glenn. How does it end poorly? For probably the first 3 or 4 months, the Ukrainians really had the Russians up against the wall, and they were killing a lot of Russians, destroying a lot of equipment. And then the tide began to shift, and now we're kind of at a stalemate. But what is the solution? And I'm not sure. that there can be a military solution to this. I think it's going to have to be a negotiated settlement, and that is going to require some real leadership on behalf of the President of the United States.
Oh, my gosh.
And quite frankly, I don't think he has it in him to be able to provide that leadership.
No.
If he did, I don't think that the Russians would have gone into the Ukraine to begin with.
So, General, is it just me? I mean, proxy wars, it's the way we avoided World War III. We would fight a proxy war. We'd fight in Vietnam against the communists, and they would quietly fund. We all knew what was going on, but we never said it out loud because we didn't want to have war direct with one another. We are bragging. We are tying everything up in a big bow and putting giant spotlights on us and then saying Putin has to go. Is there any end to this, General Boykin? Is there any limit to what we should be doing?
You know, let me start by saying that we would have been better off to have just stayed out of this from the beginning.
Yes.
Than to get this far down the road and then turn against the Ukrainians.
But
and
But wait. I don't want to be. I don't want to be held to do something horrible just because, well, we started it. We can't look foolish. We can't look weak. Everybody knows we're weak.
Yeah. And that's just even greater motivation for the Chinese to try and take Taiwan before Joe Biden is out of office. And I can guarantee you that is a major consideration right now in what they're going to do. But Glenn, let me just say this. As a nation, though, the question is for us. We signed a treaty with the Russians and the Ukrainians to transfer all of the Ukrainian nuclear material, and they were, by the way, they were the third largest holder of nuclear weapons at that time. And we've transferred that on the condition that we would help guarantee the safety and the integrity of their borders. And we're walking away from that if we drop them now. But I think the greater issue that we need to be looking at long term is what is the impact on China and the decisions that China will make here in the near term, because they're not going to wait for Biden to leave office.
No, they're not. I wouldn't if I were them. The question, people say, oh, we have to do this, or, it's a repeat of 1938. Just to refresh, you'd love this. I have to show this next time you're in town. This is the actual battle plan with the maps and everything into Poland. It has pictures of all the bridges that they needed to blow up, street by street plans. It was top secret. This came out in 38. It was printed in 38. He went in 39. The whole time he's saying to the world, I have no plans to go into Poland. Well, he obviously did. That was a lie. Is Putin, does he actually have plans to take down NATO? Would he go into Poland? Or is this enough?
Well, just the Russians said just, I think, last week that they would challenge the integrity of the borders of Poland. Now, here's the other side of this, though. And the Article 5 issue in terms of attack on one is an attack on all, and everybody in NATO has to get involved, just as they did after 9/11 when they all poured into Afghanistan there to support us. But the real issue is this. Putin has lost about 200,000 people, dead and wounded, majority wounded, but that's always the case. But he has lost, and he's had an abysmal record on the battlefield there, where his troops were shooting their own officers. They were getting out of their tanks and walking back to Belarus or crossing the border. How long do you think it's going to take before Putin will be ready to bite off invading another country? And it's not going to be something that's going to happen anytime soon. So I see that as much less of an issue. And let me finish this by saying, Glenn, I'm an American, and I love this country, and I love our history. I love what we stand for. But we cannot stand by and watch this maniac, this beast, dropping bombs on hospitals where women are giving birth, where children are being tended to, dropping bombs on bread lines. This man has to be held accountable. We need the cooperation of all of our allies in the whole world. But for me, that is so hard for me to stomach and to say we should be involved.
General, I am with you on all of that. I think he's a horrible guy. I feel for the Ukrainians, but I don't trust that the Ukrainian government is not corrupt, that they're angels. The people are just people like us. They're decent. They don't deserve this. I am not a fan of Putin. But I just can't get past the fact that it's Biden that is the one, and Milley, that gave us Afghanistan. And if we do get regime change, who's next? He could be worse. Do we have any idea who might be the replacement for Putin if we overthrow them?
Yeah, there is actually someone, and I can't tell you his name. You know, these Russian names are too tough for a North Carolina guy. But yes, I mean, I agree with you on that. I mean,
is he good or bad, General? Good or better or worse?
No, this guy is assessed to be at least just as bad.
Oh, good.
So what good does regime change do?
Yeah, right. Except destabilize.
At the same time, it comes back to the question of whether they're going to leave him unchecked in hopes that he's not going to be another Hitler in 1938 when Neville Chamberlain was shouting "peace in our time," and then he got his head handed to him. So it's we got to risk either way. We got to risk either way. And I'm concerned about what we're spending. I'm concerned about the money. But you know what? We got ourselves into this, Glenn, as far as I am concerned, because this socialist spending posture that we're in, this wasteful spending, is such that now what we want to do is relief for all college tuition debt. That is insane as far as I'm concerned. Why are we in the shape we're in? I think it's largely because of our out of control spending.
Okay, one more question. If it is regime change, and it is not a proxy war, it's open, that it's us versus them, is Putin likely to go with their own doctrine that they can use nuclear weapons? Or do you think that that's so insane that neither side would do it, even if it meant the destruction of their country?
No. First of all, if there's a regime change, it's got to come from within Russia. It's got to be the people rising up against him, and they are doing so. Mm-hmm. And there have been a lot of them have been arrested, and others that have been killed and just disappeared. But that said, I do not believe that Putin is at a point now, and probably won't be for some time, to actually use a nuclear weapon, even if it's a tactical nuclear weapon, because there are 3 nuclear nations sitting right across the border from him.
Right.
And the last thing that he wants to do is trigger an Article 5 under a nuclear umbrella.
And I hope you're right.
Dropping something that could drift over into Poland or Romania or any place like that.
If we go and we want it quickly, would China be less likely to go into Taiwan?
Absolutely. There's no question about it.
All right. Thank you very much, General. It's good to see you, my friend. God bless.
Good to be with you.
Coming up, the rebuttal to General Boykin, why we shouldn't arm and fund Ukraine. This is what it feels like when you don't have trust in anything. And you think everything is corrupt. Look, I want to play something for you. This is a criminal confessing how easy it is to find, forge, and refile your home's title in his name. Watch.
Nobody thinks that I can take their house and borrow against the house. Oh, no, I have title insurance for that. No, it's in my name, or he would have to get some special document. They would call me. Nobody's calling you. After I've stolen the title, borrowed against it, or sold the property, or done whatever I've done with it, it's 60 to 90 days to even figure out that they're the victim of this crime. By that point, you start getting foreclosure notices, and you realize you've got 4 mortgages on your house. Not only that, you don't even own your home anymore. It's not even in your name.
I discovered that neither my identity theft program or my homeowner's insurance protected me. And that is why about 5 or 6 years ago, I chose to be a home title lock customer. You could already be a victim and not know it. I want you to go to HometitleLock.com, get a free title scan with sign up. You need to verify that your home is still in your name. Use the promo code BECK, get 30 days of protection and that $100 value of the home title check free. Promo code BECK, HometitleLock.com. I am very, very fortunate. We had a guest change at the very last minute, and I'm fortunate to have as my chief of research and head writer, former Department of Defense intelligence analyst, Jason Buttrill. How are you, Jason?
I'm great. You, of course, had to have me follow one of the most greatest generals of the modern era to actually take the opposite side.
I know.
So thanks for setting me
up.
And
so don't necessarily fight him. Just let's fight for what you would believe. And I don't even know if this is your honest opinion, and I don't really want to know. Maybe after. But I am one of the guys who say we should stop. And one of my biggest points is Biden and Milley.
Yeah.
It's going to be a disaster with those guys. And things are changed. This is not a proxy war the way we have fought that for 70 years. Exactly. This is something new.
Yeah.
So first, how do you respond to people who say, you just love Putin? No, I don't.
Well, that's one of the weird things about this conflict, because you can't even question any aspect of it, or you're a Putin lover, or they'll go as far as calling you a fascist.
Right.
I've never seen this before. They're either all in, or it's like absolutes. Only Sith believe in absolutes.
Right.
I mean, it's actually insane. But I do think that it's good for someone like me that I didn't fight in the war during the Cold War. I didn't plan for the Cold War. I was after that. People like General Boykin, they did plan for the Cold War. All of the foreign policy elite right now that are saying we need to fight this war, they also planned for the Cold War. So what's interesting is they're fighting right now a battle that they didn't think they would have to fight. So right now, they just went into the mode of, okay, this is what we planned for. Now we're going to execute. Now my issue with that is, when they say that Putin is this evil monster, he is a monster.
He is.
But there is a method to his madness. He's not doing it just because he's an evil monster. Like, who am I going to evade today?
Correct.
There's a reason. And kind of like that movie 300 Rise of an Empire, at the start, the Queen of Sparta says, all of this began with a grievance, as they usually do. This began with a grievance, and it goes back to the end of the Cold War, 1990. The Secretary of State under H.W. Bush, James Baker, he sat down with Mikhail Gorbachev, and I think the majority of the people that are talking about this today have never heard this story. But they sat down and they had an agreement. Gorbachev said, look, we just don't want NATO to push all the way up to Russia. They had their own problems. They were trying to rebuild. They lost all this territory. Don't let NATO push all the way eastward. Now, James Baker, as the story goes, agreed and said, yes, we're not going to push eastward.
But we won't put it down. We won't write it.
Well, so they didn't exactly. They never put a treaty in writing. Now, if you talk to Baker and the HW administration, they'll all say, oh, Mikhail just misinterpreted. We meant we wouldn't go past East Germany. Gorbachev thought they meant go all the way through Ukraine.
Right.
So this was actually re-upped. Okay, so the Clinton administration, they completely snubbed Russia, the Kosovo War. In 2008, now this is under George W., NATO met in Romania, and this was brought up again. They listed 2 countries, Georgia and Ukraine, as possible members. Putin was there. He got pissed. What happens 3 or 4 months later? He invades Georgia. Exactly. So there's a grievance. This just like a divorce where the parents don't actually do anything in writing and don't do the legal hours. Bad things can happen.
Correct.
That's what's happened here.
Okay, but we are sitting here. It's so hard to not look at the past and not look towards all the what ifs. We are sitting here. We are giving them all this money. We're doing it out in the open, unlike ever before. And is Russia bluffing when they say, don't cross these red lines, don't cross them? I mean, I don't see how they don't view us as the enemy.
Right.
Are they bluffing? Because I agree that he's a bloodthirsty killer.
Right.
But he's not, I don't think, he's not Hitler that just wants to, take over the entire world. Right. Or he would have done it long ago.
Yeah, I don't think they're bluffing, and the evidence of that is Ukraine, right? I mean, they told them time and time again. In fact, in the weeks leading up to the actual invasion, just a little over a year ago today, they went directly to NATO and said, just put it in writing. Again, the writing from 1990, just putting in writing that Ukraine will not join NATO, and they scoffed at that. They said, I can't remember the direct quote, but the head of NATO said, Russia, who does Russia think they are? To mandate to us who we can allow into our alliance. Scoffed at them. This has been going on since 1990. There is a reason they did set the red lines. Once that was crossed, they did do it.
So, but now, if we back out, it would send a signal. Would it make it worse if we back out now? And we're like,
Well, I mean, right now, I'm at the point where I'm kind of at with the FBI. I'll use that analogy. Right now, I think the FBI should be completely demolished, and they should just put a full-on stop with the FBI and figure out what they're going to do with it, because it's just gone so off the rails. Right now, I'm at the point, stop everything. I think Congress would say we're not spending another dime. We're not sending another, piece of hardware.
You and I had done almost a year's worth of work on Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, we know the people that are involved in that. We know all of the people that Biden was using in Ukraine to overthrow in the first place and get pro-Russia people out of there, and how dirty it was. They're the same people doing this now. And that's a money laundromat. That's all it is.
Yeah.
How much of the updated numbers that are probably more realistic, over $100 billion, how much of that is actually maybe coming back here or going elsewhere to fund other operations that we don't know anything about?
Oh, who's to know? I mean, and you laid it out, at the top of the show. They don't have on-the-ground inspectors looking where all this stuff is going. They're doing this from places like Poland and other adjacent areas, but they're not on the front lines. They're not at the state bank of Ukraine and saying, and tracking all this stuff. They're not. I just this cannot be trusted. That's why I'm saying there should be a full stop. And I'm not saying don't support in some way. I'm saying that the Cold War never ended. It never ended for the Russians back in 1990.
No, we thought it did.
We thought it did. The West pretended that it did. It clearly did not. So this needs to be engaged the way it was back then.
Odds that China is going to get involved with Russia?
I think, that's the catastrophic event that we push China and Russia together.
Well, we already have. That China and Russia announced yesterday they're going to start funding each other, as far as they're going to start using the, what is it called, the renminbi as their currency.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah.
That leads to the collapse of our currency.
Yeah, you've spoken about this on other shows, about how they're in the process of building that network that exists outside the dollar-driven economy.
I saw the story that we are doubling down on drones now because of Taiwan. We think the only way, swarm drones.
Yeah.
And then yesterday, I saw that drones crossed the Russian border. One got as far as Moscow. Yeah. Hopefully not ours. But the minute that stuff happens and it's our weapon.
Yeah. So that's one big worry of mine, that when people say that it won't start a larger war. So when we say larger war, that means allies start joining Russia with China, Iran, people like that. But when our longer range offensive weaponry starts striking inside Russia, that's another one of their red lines.
Right. And you have Iran, who already has terrorists here. They're aligned now with Russia. And you have China, I mean, even if China didn't get involved, if we got bogged down there, Taiwan is gone, because we could not fight Russia and China in a big war in Europe and then in Taiwan, could we?
No, we could not. I mean, I hesitate to say whether we could handle a Taiwan war, just with the sheer distance and everything involved.
I don't think we could.
I mean,
it will be bloody ugly if we did. Okay, so I'm going to take everything that I learned, go back to the chalkboard. Has anything changed? Has your mind changed at all? Next. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, when is enough enough? Well, that's what we've been talking about tonight, but let me change that to pain. When is enough enough? Everyday pain, moderate. God forbid it's severe with you. Haven't you had about enough of it? You might have tried a lot of different things to fight it, but let me ask you to try one more thing. It's called Relief Factor. It's one of the best things that ever happened to me. My wife forced me to take it. And she's like, I'm not going to hear you whine about it if you don't. Okay, all right. I didn't think it would work for me at all. But I had had enough, and my wife had had enough. So I started taking it. And to my absolute shock, it worked for me. It's not a drug, so it's not going to space you out. And it hits inflammation in the body from 4 different directions. That's what makes it different than all your other inflammation reducers. Try the 3-week quick start. That's what I did. Just try it for 3 weeks. Take it as directed 3 times a day. It's a trial pack. See if it works. If it's not working for you in 3 weeks, probably not going to work for you. ReliefFactor.com, 800-4-RELIEF. Get the 1995 3-week quick start and see if it does to your life what it did to mine. So I'm going through this list, the pros to go in: defense of democracy, that's garbage. Rules-based order, that's garbage. Ukraine is our Poland, I don't think so. Maybe no nukes stands. We're broke. Defending democracy is not our job. Risk of nukes, I'm out on that now. World War III, food, oil supply chain. I think the only thing that he said that was important to me, and I'm talking about General Jerry Boykin, is China. You know, I felt like Boykin was talking from his heart. We screwed these people by getting in, jacking everything up. And so we're going to have to pay a price. But if we lose, China will take Taiwan. I got to tell you, I really don't know. I mean, I think I still say no, but then I read something like this. This is an actual letter signed by Neville Chamberlain, and it was after his visit in Germany, meeting with Hitler, and he wrote this to the Hitler Youth and said, I've met with your wonderful Führer. He wants peace, and you are the future of Germany. I don't want to be that guy either. Good night.